Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, King Charles greets President Trump for an unprecedented day of pomp and pageantry at Windsor Castle for the president's second state visit to Britain. The ceremonial welcome follows growing trade ties and multi-billion-dollar tech deals, plus remarks from tonight's state banquet at Windsor Castle. Malcolm Hudson reports from London. The recently fired CDC director tells her side of the story to the Senate Health Committee. Jason Blair has the takeaways. FBI Director Kash Patel in heated exchanges with lawmakers. Hear him recap the efforts that led to the arrest of Charlie Kirk's suspected shooter. Firings and visa revocations for celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. Governments and employers across the country are cracking down. Jack Bradley in Utah. And for the first time in months, interest rates have been lowered. Fed Chair Jerome Powell announcing the quarter-point cut today.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Kevin Hogan in for Tiffany Meyer. Many social media users are facing backlash from their employers for celebrating the death of conservative thought leader Charlie Kirk. The federal government is also revoking the visas of those cheering the tragedy. NTD's Jack Bradley has more from Provo, Utah.
If we have members of our society, whether they be students or otherwise, who celebrate an assassination, we have dramatic course correction that we have to take in this state.
Governments and employers across the country are cracking down on those who publicly celebrate the death of Charlie Kirk. One of the most recent cases involves a student at Texas State University who was expelled for imitating last week's assassination. The student was seen mocking Kirk's death during a memorial event at the school hosted by a local chapter of Turning Point USA, the organization founded by Charlie Kirk.
That goes beyond the bounds of what is humane, goes beyond the limits of what is humanity.
Some social media users and influencers have made comments celebrating Kirk's death as well, and some have been fired or suspended. Those include university employees, airline pilots, teachers, and doctors.
So when you see someone celebrating Charlie's murder, call them out. And hell, call their employer.
One of the more prominent cases was the firing of MSNBC analyst Matthew Dowd. He was fired a day after Kirk was killed for saying this.
Especially divisive younger figures in this, who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech or sort of aimed at certain groups. And I always go back to hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful actions.
Florida's Commissioner of Education has warned teachers and school staff to watch what they post on social media, reportedly sending a letter to districts that some teachers were already posting despicable comments online regarding the assassination and that he would be investigating all of them. Meanwhile, an online group known as Charlie Kirk Data Foundation is compiling a database of over 60,000 social media users who celebrated his death. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio says visas are now being revoked and denied for foreign nationals who celebrate the incident, telling them prepare to be deported.
If you're a foreigner and you're out there celebrating the assassination of someone who was speaking somewhere, I mean, we don't want you in the country. Why would we want to give a visa to someone who thinks it's good that someone was murdered in the public square?
While many have been fired for mocking Charlie Kirk's assassination, others have been targeted for honoring him. An Illinois TV anchor says she quit her job recently after she was suspended over this emotional tribute.
The first person who made me believe in myself, that encouraged me to chase this dream that you're watching right now. Charlie Kirk.
The local ABC News affiliate tells Fox News Digital that they never suspended her in the first place, but that they declined to comment that they threatened a suspension. 22-year-old Tyler Robinson is suspected of murdering Charlie Kirk. He faces 7 charges, including aggravated murder, which carries a death penalty if convicted in the state of Utah. His next hearing will be right here on September 29th at the 4th District Courthouse. Reporting from Provo, Utah, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Did extreme political rhetoric play a role in the assassination of Charlie Kirk? NTD's Sam Wong was out in the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
What was your initial reaction upon seeing what happened to Charlie last week?
My initial reaction was our nation is in serious trouble, because if he can be shot because of his words, then none of us have freedom of speech. And that bullet wasn't just for Charlie, it was for anyone who enjoyed their freedom to speak what they thought.
Well, the amazing thing is I heard about it from one of my coworkers. It was one of her young kids. He was a teenager that called his mom and said, "You're not going to believe this, that Charlie." And I have daughter and a son-in-law to be, and they all followed him. And it's unfortunate whether, anybody that wants to speak out against anything should have the right.
There's been a lot of talks about toning down the rhetoric, because in the past few years we're seeing this kind of rhetoric coming from mainstream media talking about, Nazis, demonizing the other side, calling them Hitler. What do you think about that? Do you think this kind of fuels the sentiment and which led up to what happened last week?
Yeah, I think it definitely fueled the system. I think social media is probably the biggest evil of all of it.
The fella who's in the news, supposed to be being objective, has a real strong, he has a dog in the fight. If John Wilkes Booth, is it okay for him to have, you want to talk about his sweetness, you want to talk about Lee Harvey Oswald, you want to talk about the fellow that shot Martin Luther King. Let's have a lot of sympathy for him. Is that going to fly?
I am a huge advocate for free speech, but speech has its consequences. And when you demean people and you talk down to people, when you call people names that trigger a negative response, you become responsible for what happens to that individual.
We're hearing some people on the other side of the aisle, in particular, people like John Fetterman, Dean Phillips on the Democratic side, urging people on his side to tone down the temperature. What are your thoughts on that?
100%. That's the right thing to do.
Well, the best thing I can think of about that was they were having a moment of silence for Charlie in the Congress, I believe, and everybody bowed their head. And then Lauren Boebert called out and said, "Let's have some prayer." And the other side said, "No, doesn't matter who you are, stirring the pot isn't going to make things better."
I agree, yes. And I'm glad he...
Give Fetterman credit.
Yeah. You have a different viewpoint of it, but he's finally coming out and admitting enough is enough, and you need to stop this rhetoric.
Common sense, a little bit of common sense goes a long way. There ain't much of it these days.
It's not so common anymore.
What can we learn from the texts allegedly written by the suspect in Charlie Kirk's assassination? And what legal standard must the Trump administration meet in going after groups that incite political violence with hate speech? Tune into NTD's Capitol Report with Steve Lance at 7 p.m. for analysis with Manhattan Institute fellow Charles Fain Lehman. And when Charlie Kirk was in high school, he watched and listened to political commentator Glenn Beck. Today, Beck commemorated Kirk while filling in as the latest guest to host the Charlie Kirk Show. Here's more.
The light is dimming, yes, but it always does before the dawn.
Political commentator Glenn Beck cheerfully commemorated Charlie Kirk on Wednesday as the most recent guest host of The Charlie Kirk Show. Beck hosted the show from Kirk's studio and sat just across from Kirk's empty chair. Choking back tears, he recalled meeting a very young Kirk and asking him what he wanted to do.
So gracious, he said, "I want to be you. I want to do what you do." Let me translate. I want to be Rush Limbaugh.
After placing a gifted gold microphone he received from Limbaugh's widow in front of Kirk's chair, Beck said he wanted to tell Charlie something, but he ran out of time.
What I would have said to Charlie was, "You were thinking too small. I want to be Rush Limbaugh someday." Charlie was a pastor and a priest, and listening to the way he could argue and think differently, he was a rabbi as well, and one of the best. He was a political organizer. He was a political think tank himself. He was a compassionate friend. He surpassed Rush Limbaugh. by miles.
The show featured collages of Kirk as well as clips of Beck's program on Blaze TV. Beck called Kirk a civil rights leader.
It is time that we point out that what he was doing was not politics. What he was doing was trying to stand up for people's civil rights.
Other guests who joined Beck included a Turning Point USA spokesperson, a researcher who's investigating George Soros, and a fellow host at Blaze TV. Also on Wednesday, Vice President J.D. Vance spoke about Kirk during a visit to a Michigan manufacturing facility. He said because there were a lot of what he called kids in attendance, they should know this.
TPUSA is a great organization founded by my friend Charlie Kirk that takes the message of free speech and conservative values all over our college campuses here in the state of Michigan and elsewhere. I know I speak for all of the kids behind me, all of the great TPUSA members and also the alums, that over the past 10 years, Turning Point USA has not just been an organization, it has been the fountain of a movement all across the United States of America. Charlie was an exceptionally talented individual. People don't realize how integral he was, how important Charlie Kirk was.
Susan Menares tells her version of what happened when she was fired from her position as CDC director. She tells the Senate Health Committee that the split happened after feuding with Health Secretary RFK Jr. over vaccine policy. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has the highlights.
Since my removal, several explanations have been offered. That I told the secretary I would resign, that I was not aligned with the administration priorities, or that I was untrustworthy. None of those reflect what actually happened.
Former CDC Director Dr. Susan Menares tells the Senate Health Committee that on August 25th, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. instructed her to do two things.
He directed me to commit in advance to approving every ACIP recommendation, regardless of the scientific evidence. He also directed me to dismiss career officials responsible for vaccine policy without cause.
Menares continued saying, quote, he said if I was unwilling to do both, I should resign. I responded that I could not pre-approve recommendations without reviewing the evidence, and I had no basis to fire scientific experts. He told me he had already spoken with the White House several times about having me removed. Earlier this month, Menares made statements through her attorney. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. testified to the Senate Finance Committee that Dr. Menares hasn't been truthful.
It's imperative that we remove officials with conflicts of interest and catastrophically bad judgment and political agendas. We need unbiased, politics-free, transparent, evidence-based science in the public interest.
Committee Chairman Senator Cassidy opened saying that the hearing and Menares' testimony are being held in accordance with President Trump's goal of radical transparency.
It may be impossible to learn who's telling the truth, but this hearing is an initial step in trying to answer why the top leadership of the CDC was fired or resigned before they could be fired.
Menares was accompanied by her attorney, Mark Zaid.
You have to know that Mark Zaid is a leading opponent of President Trump, notorious for his online activity that is very anti-Trump. He was heavily involved in President Trump's first impeachment. Why did you hire a guy like that?
So I actually was not aware of any of those details associated with Mark.
Right.
Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
FBI Director Kash Patel testified before Congress for a second day in a row, this time before the House Judiciary Committee. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has the details of the hearing.
Certain members of this committee, you know, they want their 15 seconds on TV, stamping and coming. Maybe it's for fundraising. Maybe they're struggling in their district. They need a little bump. But they turn a committee into a clown show. And you're being attacked, Director, is because you're effective.
During the 7-month tenure of Kash Patel as FBI director, the Bureau has captured 23,000 violent criminals, twice as many as during the same period last year. The Bureau has also identified 47,000 child victims, which is a 35% increase from last year, and apprehended 1,500 child predators, a 15% increase from last year. And most notably, the FBI has captured 4 out of the top 10 most wanted criminals in the country.
In addition to getting the truth to the people, Director Patel is getting the bad guys off the street. He's moved agents out of Washington, got the focus off of politics here in D.C., and is instead putting bad guys behind bars. He's also ended the weaponization of the FBI.
The Democratic ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Jamie Raskin, focused on character attacks against Director Patel and accused them of lack of transparency.
Just as we've learned how dangerous it is to put a science-denying anti-vaxxer in charge of our public health, we've learned how dangerous it is to name as director of the FBI a man who thinks of himself as a fairy tale knight who keeps a fire-breathing dragon named DOJ at home to forcibly drive villains out of the kingdom.
Director Patel pushed back against the accusations and detailed how the FBI during his 7-month tenure has already shared with Congress 3 times as many documents as his predecessor did during his 7-year tenure.
In just a few short months, we have already unleashed 1,000 FBI personnel across this country. Every single state across this country is getting a plus up. This is a fiction that the FBI is short or that we are compromising the men and women in the field. They do not need to be in Washington, D.C., so we're sending them into the field to each and every one of your states. Because of that, crime is at an all-time low.
Director Patel also agreed to continue to share any document requested by Congress on the Epstein case that he is legally allowed to share. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
King Charles and the British royal family greeted President Trump with unprecedented pomp and pageantry for his 2nd British state visit. It's the largest military ceremonial welcome for a state visit in living memory and follows a string of multi-billion-dollar tech deals between the two nations. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more for us from London.
President Donald Trump paid a heartfelt tribute to America's relationship with the UK at a lavish banquet, saying the word special does not begin to do it justice.
We're joined by history and fate, and by love and language, and by transcendent ties of culture, tradition, ancestry, and destiny. We're like 2 notes in one chord or 2 verses of the same poem, each beautiful on its own, but really meant to be played together. The bond of kinship and identity between America and the United Kingdom is priceless and eternal.
He said they must defend the exceptional heritage that makes them who they are and continue to stand for the values and the people of the English-speaking world. King Charles likewise emphasized the enduring bond between the two nations, capping a day of pageantry during the president's 2nd state visit.
Our countries are working together in support of crucial diplomatic efforts, not least of which, Mr. President, is your own personal commitment to finding solutions to some of the world's most intractable conflicts in order to secure peace.
The king added that in renewing their bond, they do so with unshakable trust in their friendship and in their shared commitment to independence and liberty. Other elements of the royal-focused first day include a visit to the tomb of Queen Elizabeth II, lunch with the royal family, a special beating retreat ceremony with a flypast of UK and US F-35 fighter jets and the Red Arrows. Alongside the grand ceremony, Trump's visit features expanding trade ties. Britain and the US have agreed a technology pact to boost ties in AI, quantum computing, and civil nuclear energy. Microsoft said it is planning to invest more than $30 billion in its UK operations and artificial intelligence infrastructure over the next 4 years. It plans to expand UK capital expenditures and bring 23,000 advanced AI chips to the UK. Google said it would make $6.8 billion in new investments into Britain.
There's downside risks that we need to work on together to make sure we mitigate the downside risks, but there's also tremendous opportunity. in economic growth, in social services, advancing science, you name it. And that special US-UK technology relationship is not something to be taken lightly.
The US tech company also announced the opening of a new data center close to London, designed to help meet growing demand for its AI-powered services like Google Cloud, Search, Maps, and Workspace. Other firms announcing commitments include NVIDIA, CoreWeave, Salesforce, and Amazon Web Services, with investments ranging from hundreds of millions to several $1 billion. Back in Windsor, the royal town is bustling with people who gathered to show their support for Trump.
America is our special ally. And apart from that, Trump's mom is from here. He's back home. He's not coming on services. He's back home to his mom's place.
I'm here today to show my support for President Trump, who is up against all odds, but is always battling for the people, trying to clean up the mess that's been created for a long time in the States. He's doing a fabulous job. He's doing what he can internationally, and a lot of people need a lot of help. And I think he's a beaming light that can show people the way.
He's a man of God. He's a beautiful family, beautiful wife. Sovereignty is key for his country. He respects his country. He loves his country, loves his people. And that's something you don't often see, and he's not afraid to say it.
There will be no public-facing elements during Trump's engagements, with security paramount for the 47th US president. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
And to the U.S. economy, the Federal Reserve is cutting interest rates for the first time this year. Fed Chair Jerome Powell today announced a quarter-point cut. This puts rates in a new range between 4 to 4.25%. This comes as concerns have intensified over the U.S. labor market. The central bank also signaled that 2 more cuts could be on the way before the end of the year. This is the first rate cut of President Trump's second term. The Fed said it was waiting out uncertainty around the administration's policy shifts, including tariffs. The rate cut passed by an 11-1 vote. The no vote was a Trump appointee, Stephen Mourn. He favored a larger half-point cut. And coming up, Israeli forces drop leaflets in Gaza City, warning residents to evacuate the combat zones. Meanwhile, Israel's military is set to begin using laser weapons by the end of the year. Jason Perry reports. After a push by President Trump, Europe now wants to stop buying Russian oil sooner than planned. Arian Pastar explains Trump's concerns over the imports after the break. Welcome back. In the Middle East, Israeli forces make an additional evacuation route for Gaza City, as some residents are refusing to leave the combat zones. Meanwhile, Israel says it's set to begin using laser weapons by the end of the year. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
Israeli forces dropped leaflets over Gaza City on Wednesday. Children were seen scrambling around trying to grab one of the papers, which read, "Urgent warning to the residents of Gaza City and its neighborhoods. If you find this leaflet, you are in a dangerous combat zone. You must evacuate immediately via Al Rashid Street, even on foot to the south of Wadi Gaza." A local resident shared his thoughts.
I am not leaving. Where should I go? There is nowhere to go. Where should I go? There is no place. We are staying. If we are going to die, we will die here.
Israel has accused Hamas terrorists of not allowing residents to evacuate in order to use them as human shields. Another man said he was now planning to leave Gaza City.
Today is the first day the occupation soldiers began their ground offensive. I fear for my children. My family is big. 6 people. Myself, my wife, and 6 people. We have some belongings, which we will flee with.
And other residents were seen evacuating Gaza City by car and on foot. Israeli forces said they had struck over 150 terrorist targets in Gaza City in the last 48 hours as they try to defeat the Hamas terrorist group and free the remaining hostages. Meanwhile, the European Commission proposed sanctions against Israel over the war in the Gaza Strip. But the proposal does not currently have enough support from European countries to pass. The EU foreign policy chief said the aim is to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza. In a post on X, Israel's foreign minister said the proposed sanctions were, quote, morally and politically distorted. And just the day before, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel was going to produce an independent arms industry, and he said it will be able to withstand any kind of international political constraints. And in a related development, Israel said they're set to begin using laser weapons by the end of the year. The Iron Beam will be able to counter aerial threats, including rockets, mortars, and drones at a low cost. Meanwhile, Qatar's emir was in Amman on Wednesday, where he met with Jordan's king. Both leaders condemned Israel's recent strikes on Hamas leaders in Qatar. Also on Wednesday, a senior Hamas leader, Ghazi Hamid, made an appearance on Qatar's state-run media network Al Jazeera. Israel's strike in Doha last week is said to have killed 5 senior Hamas leaders, but Hamad said he survived the attack. Jason Perry, NTD News.
After a push by President Trump, Europe now wants to stop buying Russian oil sooner than planned. Trump has been suggesting that Europe's oil purchases have helped finance the war against Ukraine. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pastar has the Ukraine update.
Europe has to stop buying oil from Russia.
In recent days, President Trump has repeatedly called on Europe to stop Russian oil imports. The European Union is already negotiating legal proposals to phase out imports of Russian oil and gas by 2028. The president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, now says she had a phone call with Trump discussing those topics. She says the EU will propose speeding up the phase-out of Russian fossil imports. Poland also wants to phase out Russian oil imports before the 2028 deadline. The country's energy minister wrote a letter to the EU saying, "I appeal to you to agree on a common goal of completely phasing out imports of Russian crude oil by the end of 2026. Also in Poland on Wednesday, the country is commemorating the anniversary of the Soviet invasion in 1939. This comes exactly 1 week after Russian drones entered Polish airspace.
This drone attack on Poland was primarily aimed at disorganization and chaos, including in our minds and hearts.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio this week said the investigation into the drone incursion was scheduled to take a few more days. And the Chancellor of Germany now says Russia might be aiming at new targets in Europe.
Wie konkret das werden kann. We have seen how real this threat can be with the violation of Polish and Romanian airspace in recent days. Putin has long been testing the limits.
NATO is holding a military drill in Poland on Wednesday. The exercise includes tanks, helicopters and fighter jets. This comes just 1 day after Russia and Belarus conducted military drills across the Polish border in Belarus. And in other Russia-related news, the widow of late opposition leader Alexei Navalny reports having new information on his death.
In February 2024, we were able to obtain samples of Alexei's biological material, and these labs in 2 different countries reached the same conclusion. Alexei was killed. More specifically, he was poisoned.
Navalny died in an Arctic penal colony in February last year. The Kremlin previously said Navalny died from a combination of, quote, a dozen different diseases. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Stay with us. Several Democrats join House Republicans to address crime in Washington, D.C. Plus, 2 lawmakers are asking the Treasury to probe a China-based billionaire they say is sowing political discord in America on behalf of the Chinese regime. Melina Wisecup has the latest from Capitol Hill and calls for the U.S. to cut all ties with the Chinese regime's illegal organ trade. A doctor against forced organ harvesting tells us why this is so important and how to protect yourself from unknowingly being complicit when we come back. It's good to have you back with us. House lawmakers have passed the first of several bills to address crime in Washington, D.C. Republicans say the bills could be used as a blueprint to address crime in other cities and states. NTD's congressional correspondent Melina Weiskup has more about the bills.
Two crime-related bills passed the House and are now headed to the Senate for a vote. They aim to overturn Washington, D.C.'s laws addressing youth offenders. The first one aims to lower the age from 16 to 14, in which minors can be charged as adults for certain felonies, like murder. The second one, called the D.C. Crimes Act, aims to charge young adults exactly as adults, redefining the term youth offender from age 24 to age 18. It also aims to provide more transparency into how many young people here in D.C. are actually committing crimes. They're creating a public website to keep track of it. Here's the bill sponsor, Congressman Byron Donalds.
District officials have actively facilitated dysfunction and chaos through their progressive soft-on-crime policies. Instead of addressing the clear epidemic of youth crime in the city, the D.C. City Council increased the age of youth offenders to individuals 24 years old and younger, meaning fully grown legal adults in the District of Columbia can receive sentences meant for children.
His bill got the support of 30 Democrats, though most Democrats were opposed, saying that bills like this undermines D.C.'s autonomy. Now we'll have to see if that same level of Democrat support makes its way over to the Senate so that these bills actually have a shot at becoming law. In other news, lawmakers from the House Oversight Committee are now asking the Treasury Department to probe a China-based billionaire by the name of Neville Roy Singham. These lawmakers say that he's the main backer behind a Marxist group, Party for Socialism and Liberation, and that he's also played a key role in organizing nationwide protests, including the riots in Los Angeles. This is part of a broader investigation. The chairman of the Oversight Committee, James Comer, is looking into the Chinese Communist Party's attempts to sow discord among Americans. Lawmakers say that Singham is acting on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party to magnify internal disputes. So now they're asking the Treasury Department to formally open an investigation into Singham after he previously ignored the committee's requests. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Organ transplants, they're a source of continued life and a source of abuse. The Department of Health and Human Services is working to shield Americans from being complicit in unethical and illegal organ transplants. That's on two fronts. One is at home, after HHS announced reforms following the revelation that some donors were still alive at the time of the transplant. The other is abroad. HHS has recently called for the U.S. to sever its ties with China's organ transplant system. It cites widely documented crimes in the Chinese Communist Party's murder-for-profit scheme, in which it forcibly removes the organs of living prisoners of conscience. They're often from members of the persecuted spiritual group Falun Gong. And here for insight into this is Dr. Weldon Gilcrease III, Deputy Director of Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting. Thank you for being here, Weldon. Several states, including Utah and Texas, have passed laws barring insurance coverage for organ transplants from China. And a similar bill at the federal level is advancing through Congress, along with the Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act, sanctioning those involved in the illicit organ trade. What more can be done to ensure that Americans are not complicit in this gruesome practice?
Yeah, I think awareness is important. I think there's a lack of awareness within the general population as well as within the medical community. So I think one of the big issues is it's just not understood that the claim in 2014 made by a Chinese transplant surgeon, a liver transplant surgeon in December of 2014, that China would stop and end its practice of using executed criminals for organ transplants in early 2015 has clearly shown to be untrue. There was a 2019 paper showing that they were manipulating their transplant donor data. The data registry was being manipulated. There was a China tribunal in 2019 and 2020 that published a 560-page report after spending a year looking at the data and interviewing over 50 witnesses, showing that forced organ harvesting or killing innocent prisoners of conscience for transplant had occurred in China since probably about 2000 and continues to happen within China. So I think there is an increasing awareness in the last several years that this is a horrific practice, a gruesome practice that's happening within operating rooms throughout China. And I do believe we need to do everything we can as a medical community and as a country to not be complicit in these crimes. And that includes having our citizens aware that if they're going to go to China and get an organ for transplant, that there's a high likelihood somebody is being murdered for that organ.
Awareness is such an important part of this. And to add to what you're saying, Dr. Gilcrease, author and political commentator Armstrong Williams writes that American medical institutions have maintained extensive partnerships with Chinese hospitals, training transplant surgeons, and have thereby legitimized their illicit practices. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, we continue to allow their data to be put into our medical journals. We continue collaboration in terms of projects and in terms of scientific knowledge with Chinese transplant centers. And I couldn't agree more. I think the problem is there's a belief by a lot of our transplant institutions and a lot of our transplant societies. They believe what the Chinese government and the Chinese transplant community said in 2014. The problem is there just is no data to back up and to support their claim of stopping this horrific practice. So although I think it's with good intention to cooperate and to collaborate with transplant in China, the reality is that when something this evil is happening, you're complicit in something that is this evil.
Thank you for bringing more awareness to that. Now, according to the China Tribunal, the main target of forced organ harvesting in China are the Falun Gong practitioners. These are adherents of the spiritual practice who strive to live by truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. What does that reveal about the nature of the Chinese Communist Party that it would target these peaceful people?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting, if you look at this topic of forced organ harvesting, the lens of looking through forced organ harvesting and looking at the main victim group that you mentioned, Falun Gong practitioners, a spiritual discipline that really took off in the 1990s in China. If you look at forced organ harvesting, it says everything about what the Chinese Communist Party is about, and that's control. That's having the elite in control. That's a lack of value of human life. That's a lack of the values of truth and compassion and tolerance. So I think it says everything about what the problem with the Chinese Communist Party and our close collaboration over the last 30 to 40 to 50 years that was, again, well-intentioned, I think, with the idea that if we build them up economically, if we collaborate with China, that eventually our values will influence their values. But we've seen the opposite happen. We've seen the values of the Chinese Communist Party of control, of deception, of lies, of deceit, of a lack of value for human life. We've seen the opposite happen. We've seen that come here rather than vice versa.
And to add to that valuable insight that you're bringing, the UK Parliament has heard testimony suggesting organs in China are available on demand, meaning people are killed on the spot in Chinese hospitals, which is why the wait times are drastically shorter than in other developed nations. And yet, organ tourism by Westerners to China does take place. How can that be prevented?
That's a great question. Some of the legislation that you mentioned earlier, the Falun Gong Protection Act, the Stop Forced Organ Harvesting or Stopped Organ Harvesting Act, both of these are legislation that are currently, I think, within the Senate in the United States. Some of the bills that you mentioned in Tennessee and Texas and Arizona and Idaho and in my state of Utah, some of these bills are trying to get at that. I think one of the things that's happening in the United States is we're very protective of personal health information. So we try to be very protective about our patients and what gets to the public and what gets out there in terms of what their personal information is in terms of their health. And I think what that's allowed for is a lack of understanding or knowledge of how ubiquitous the practice is. How many Americans in our states have traveled over to China? And as you mentioned, these are vital organs like lungs and heart and liver that have been scheduled for transplant sometimes within 2 weeks, sometimes within a month. And how do we understand how much this is happening, how many patients have gone over there? We certainly don't have a good system within our medical centers to understand that. If I look in my electronic health record of the patients I've had with transplants, if they haven't had a transplant at our center, there is no field within their electronic health record that tells me where they received their vital organ. So I think this is what the legislation in Utah has tried to address. Can we address a lack of payment for patients that are going to travel to China and get an illegally sourced organ? So the legislation is certainly a step forward. And I think the legislation really does have promise of making more people aware of this horrific practice.
Dr. Weldon Gilcrease III, thank you for this very comprehensive discussion on this important topic.
Thank you so much for having me.
And just ahead of the holiday season, Amazon says it usually sees extra activity. The company says it's now investing more than $1 billion to raise company wages. And the Los Angeles Olympics are still 3 years away, but plans for ticket sales are already underway. We'll tell you how you can lock in your spot for the 2028 games. And in baseball, two-way star Shohei Ohtani could become a three-way star come playoff time. NTD's Dave Martin reports when we return. Welcome back. Delivery workers could soon see a pay raise. Amazon says it's investing $1 billion in compensation for its employees. NTD's David Lamb reports.
Amazon says it's investing more than $1 billion in compensating its U.S. warehouse workers and drivers. On Wednesday, Senior VP Udit Madan said the average pay is increasing to more than $23 per hour, and that if you include benefits, that comes out to more than $30 per hour in value. The VP said, "A lot of the changes we're sharing today are based on what our employees say matters to them." Amazon also says it's lowering the cost of its entry-level health plan to $5 per week with $5 copays starting in 2026. The announcement comes as we head into the holiday season and shopping events. More than 1.5 million people work for the company globally. Last December, workers at 7 Amazon facilities went on strike. The Teamsters Union wanted a labor agreement during a key shopping period. And in January, Walmart, the largest private employer in the U.S., said that average hourly wages for its employees would surpass $18, up from $17.50. David Lamb, NTD News.
And we have some breaking news. 3 officers were killed and 2 remain in critical but stable condition after a shooting this afternoon in rural central Pennsylvania. The shooter is confirmed to be dead. That's according to the Pennsylvania State Police Commissioner who spoke just moments ago. Attorney General Pam Bondi also confirmed that multiple law enforcement officers were shot in York County and that the FBI and other agencies are responding. Governor Josh Shapiro and Attorney General Dave Sunday separately confirmed on X that they were on their way to the scene. We'll keep you updated as this story develops. And in other news, Los Angeles is gearing up to take the world stage as it hosts the 2028 Olympic Games. Olympic officials released details on how and when fans can secure tickets for the Games. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
Officials announced that general registration for the 2028 Los Angeles Olympic Games will open in January 2026. Paralympic tickets, which are coming to Los Angeles for the very first time, will go on sale in 2027. Fans will need to register at la28.org for a chance to buy Olympic tickets. Those chosen in the lottery will be assigned a date and time to purchase when ticket sales open in spring 2026. But those who aren't selected in the first round will still have a chance in later draws. Ticketing will be managed by AXS and Eventim, and single event tickets will start at $28. Early access will be offered to residents near Olympic venues in Los Angeles, Orange, and San Diego counties, as well as Oklahoma City. Official LA28 travel and hospitality packages go on sale in early 2026 through On Location, offering ticket bundles with perks like guaranteed lodging, official transport, premium seating, and curated experiences. Major Olympic zones include downtown LA, Exposition Park, Long Beach, Inglewood, and Carson. Venues such as the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, the Intuit Dome in Inglewood, and the Honda Center in Anaheim will also host events. The Olympics will begin on July 14, 2028, with the opening ceremony taking place across 2 venues, the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum and SoFi Stadium. The games will run until July 30, 2028. LA28 CEO Reynold Hoover says the games will be a chance to purchase a ticket to history with options designed for both local families and international visitors. Christina Corona, NTD News.
LA Dodgers two-way star Shohei Ohtani could become a three-way star in baseball's upcoming playoffs. Last night, the reigning MVP floated the idea of playing the outfield next month, which would allow him to pitch in relief. But the idea comes with a hitch. NTD's Dave Martin has more.
Shohei Ohtani pitched 5 scoreless innings last night and hit his National League leading 50th home run at the plate. But it was all for naught as the Dodgers bullpen allowed 9 runs in relief in a loss to the Phillies. Afterwards, Ohtani floated the idea of possibly playing in the outfield for the playoffs, which start in just a couple of weeks. The two-way star, though, hasn't played the field since 2021 when he was a member of the Angels. But a move there would allow the Dodgers to possibly use Ohtani as a valuable relief pitcher without losing his potent bat in the lineup. Baseball's rules allow for Ohtani to start a game as a pitcher and then transition back to being the team's designated hitter, or DH, after he's been relieved. But if the Dodgers want to have Ohtani come on as a reliever, they would then lose his normal DH spot in the lineup, forcing the team to use a pitcher to bat instead. Ohtani, though, who's logged more than 1,000 games in his career, has appeared just 7 times in the outfield for a grand total of 16 2/3 innings, which is less than 2 games worth of play. Meanwhile, Dodgers manager Dave Roberts said he appreciated Ohtani's gesture, but said he hasn't taken a fly ball all year. Ohtani's Dodgers play host to the Phillies again tonight. This is Dave Martin for NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kevin Hogan. Good night.